Episode 5 Lair of Naquicar's Children. Thus was sealed in the Black Forest the alliance between the first son of fire and the god of the eternal flame, an alliance that would have considerable repercussions. This is so true that, 1600 years later, there was another son of fire, Zairom Gwenor, observing the same woods, pondering the consequences of Larkan's actions. He was, of course, not fully aware of the chain of events initiated by the young slave's acts, which had culminated in that day. However, Zairom understood, or at least sensed, that what he faced was ultimately Larkan's legacy. Yet although this analysis was correct, and an abyss separated the two sons of fire, in at least one aspect they were alike. Larkan, born a servant, became the liberator of an oppressed people. In Zairom Gwenor's hands also lay the fate of a vast enslaved population, much of it born in the kingdom his ancestors once called home.
You seem particularly troubled, Zairom. Don't you want to talk?
Asked a dark-skinned, bald man. His face was adorned with a goatee of white strands. He sat beside Zairom in the carriage that slid along the vast road. Through the window, the conifers and pines of Zainor Darien were visible.
I was just observing the Black Forest, Laikar. I think I was remembering the stories you used to tell about that forest when I was a child.
Ah, yes, I remember perfectly. All children love those stories, though at the same time they feel fear. Fear sometimes attracts people, I suppose,
said the old man, smiling.
I see the same apprehension in you now, though you were trying to hide it. Won't you tell me what's bothering you?
Laikar had worked for the House of Genor since Zairom was very young. Because of this, he considered him almost like a son. Sometimes, as is natural for many parents, he treated him like a child, despite Zairom, at 31 years old, standing tall with dark beards covering his face, embodying maturity itself.
There are still many days of travel before we reach the capital. 2/6 between my estate and Naquicaron is a long period. I suppose that's making me anxious. However, what really troubles me is that I have many suspicions and few certainties regarding the Emperor's plans.
I think I understand. In that case, why didn't you postpone this trip a little longer, since you still don't feel secure?
I have been doing that for 8 months, my friend. Since my son was born, I have used all sorts of strategies to delay my trip to the capital. However, this method cannot be used indefinitely. After all, one must not forget that gaining more time also gives more time to the Emperor.
That's true. However, there is one consolation. Zoltari will be there. Who knows, maybe he can clarify your doubts.
Zairom nodded.
I wish Hiram were here with us in this carriage. I could tell him some stories about the Black Forest.
The old man deflected, obviously trying to distract Zairom from his worries.
It's better that he stayed with Sirat and Tyrom in the other carriage. At least he's safe from your stories. I remember having nightmares because of them, especially the one about Laorom.
Zairom smiled, and the old man accompanied him with a hearty laugh.
Yes, especially that part where the Patriarch is quartered by Creon. You were terrified.
Tell me, Laikar, what did you think of him?
Asked the son of fire suddenly, once again assuming a taciturn expression.
Who?
Hiram, of course.
I've already told you what I think when we met at the trade post. What more do you want to know?
Do you really think he looks a lot like his mother?
You know that better than I do, Zairom. There's no reason to insist on this subject.
That's true. I suppose he does look a lot like her.
He admitted with a hint of bitterness. A painful memory emerged in his mind.
Hiram will never be a true son of fire, just as I will never be.
On the other hand, Tyrom even has flame-colored hair,
commented the old man, laughing discreetly. As Zairom and his escort slid along the road that bordered the Black Forest, they could also contemplate an equally interesting landscape to the right. It was the imposing and ever-turbulent Sea of Ice, whose coast had almost no beaches. Generally, the land ended abruptly in cliffs, and the ever-agitated sea crashed against the rocks. Where the slope was lower, the waves exploded against the boulders, sending a rain of foam over the caravan. Hiram, in the other carriage, was mesmerized by the scenery.
Isn't it beautiful, Sirat?
the child said.
This boy is so easily impressed.
Why?
You think this place is beautiful because you've never seen Algar. The city where your grandfather lived is perched on a cliff like this. There, the sea is a deep blue, sometimes greenish on very sunny days, and seagulls are always flying and singing. The waves are rhythmic, as if they were dancing a rehearsed dance. Here, on the other hand, the sea is grey and seems to be eternally fighting with itself and the rock.
Don't be sad, Sirat. I had never seen the sea before. That's why I thought it was beautiful.
I'm not sad, Hiram,
said the young woman, attempting a smile.
Sometimes I just feel nostalgic, that's all.
One day we'll visit Algar too. You'll see.
Maybe. Then again, I don't even know if I'd like that. The city no longer exists. All that remains are ruins, rubble. But don't be upset because of me, dear. I'm perfectly fine.
She reassured him, forcing another smile.
Children's eyes are always ready to marvel because everything is new to them. So, enjoy the scenery.
Indeed, Hiram would have many opportunities to be amazed. The ancient city of heroes was one of the remarkable sights he had the chance to behold. Naquicar, too, for entirely different reasons, felt uneasy the day they passed near Nogat Zainan. It was, as everyone knew, his hometown. His family had migrated there due to the invasion of the city of the Delta by the ancient Celian Empire, around 300 years earlier. One day, for reasons known to few, he had left his city for good. It was a lost, painful past that the old man was forced to confront when he spotted the pointed towers of the ancestral fortress of Telosai in the distance. But Zairam and his escort only briefly passed by the city of heroes. They did not take long to continue their journey towards their destination, skirting the imposing Crystal Lake and finally arriving at the very heart of the empire, the capital, the greatest city in the known world. Nothing compared, in grandeur or magnificence, to the den of the sons of Naquicar, the birthplace and center of the great southern empire. When they finally reached their destination, the sky was overcast and a cold wind lashed at the travelers. Lightning streaked across the sky, cutting through the horizon, foretelling the arrival of rain. Hiram was asleep, exhausted from the long journey. His father had to wake him. At first, he thought he was at home, recalling a distant night when his presence had been requested. But that was not the case. He woke up in a foul mood, looking around the carriage cabin and realizing that the long journey was not yet over. The boy's anxiety and boredom were understandable, but these feelings were soon dispelled by the breathtaking sight that followed. In the distance, there it was. Countless dots spread across the plain, bordering a sea of gray and blue. At first, Hiram thought it was a crowd of people, but he soon realized that each of those dots was, in fact, a building. His attention was drawn to a region surrounded by vast walls, at the center of which stood, towering and imposing, the imperial palace, atop a hill. The structure was clearly distinguishable, even from such a great distance. The boy concluded that it must be the largest building ever constructed. Hiram briefly recalled all the landscapes that had impressed him during the journey. For a fleeting moment, he revisited the plateau lands, the familiar grassy hills, and the whisper of the wind brushing the fields, reinforcing the eternal silence. He observed the tree-covered mountains separating the central regions from the coastal areas, and the swampy plain, a vast green carpet stretching almost infinitely when viewed from the heights of the great mountain range. He remembered the western caravan city, its houses, and the trade post where they had met Naquicar. He saw the trees of Xanor Darien and the fierce waves of the Sea of Ice, contrasting with the still peace of the Crystal Lake. He sensed that all these landscapes would fade in significance over time, as happens with fleeting memories, those in which the initial impression is more powerful than their true value. Naquicar, however, was different. At that moment, he realized that the sight of the great capital would not fade like the others. it would remain engraved in his memory forever. In fact, this memory would never lose its strength, at least not until his return. Only twice in his life would Hiram set foot on the land that Larkan had once claimed for himself. However, Hiram's impression, no matter how lasting or significant it was, did not do justice to what the empire truly was. For to understand the kingdom that Larkan created, it is not enough to behold the great Naquicar, as that is merely its material aspect. It is not enough to read the book written by the former slave called Verses, for in that case, one only grasps the spiritual and ideological dimension of the empire. One must look beyond. One must dive into the core, where matter and spirit intertwine, into the very nucleus where the flame that burned in Larkan's heart still flickers. And to do so, one must reap from the past the right moment, when the first king of the Sons of Fire claimed the throne of the great southern island. One must seek the instant of his triumph, the night of his final confrontation with the beast Creon.